Hi, my name is Rick Wegley and welcome to Ask NCM. I'm one of the instructors here at the Institute in Kansas City, and we do our best to answer questions that come up from our clients, over online requests or even sometimes in our classrooms or on site at dealerships. And on a recent dealer visit that I was making, an experienced service director that has been in the business for 30 plus years, we got into a great conversation about effective labor rate. And he made the comment that a past client instructor had quoted to him that you really can't manage effective labor rate. It's just an effect that you can't have an impact on. And I totally disagreed with the answer that he was given, and I took a few minutes to explain to him why. So if you could give me a few minutes of your time today, I'd like to explain to you the importance of managing effective labor rate. First of all, you have to understand that effective labor rate is calculated by total dollar labor sales divided by total technician billed hours. And you think, well, I don't really have too much control over either of those, but you truly do. First of all, you have to understand what your work mix is in your shop. And understanding effective labor rate will have a shift to the negative number if you don't manage your work mix in the shop, as well as managing your selling prices and your tech costing with regard to hours. So to give you an explanation on that and to be able to demonstrate to him, I asked this service director, I said, so how much time do you pay a technician to do an oil change? And he said, well, I pay 3/10 of an hour. And I said, okay, that's pretty industry standard on that. It varies a little bit by brand. I said, so how much time do you pay a technician to do a tire rotation? And he said, well, I pay him 4/10 of an hour. And I said, okay, that's not unpractical, and that's, again, right along with many industry standards. So I said, so how much do you pay a technician to do an oil change and a tire rotation? And at that point, he said, I pay him 7/10 of an hour. And I said, that's where we may have a little bit of a disruption or a disconnect. So let's think about this for a second. If I was a technician and you handed me a repair order and you said, Rick, I need for you to go do a tire rotation on this car. And I walk to the keyboard, I find the keys, I go to the parking lot, I locate the car, I bring it into the shop, I set the lift on it, I pop the hood, I check the fluids, I pull the cabin air filter, I pull the engine air filter, I check the lights, I test the battery, I raise the car up on a lift, I do an undercarriage inspection on the car, I drop the oil, I replace the filter, I check the tire pressures, measure the brakes if I can access the brakes on the car. I reinstall the oil drain plug, put a new filter on, I lower it down, I top off all the fluids, fill the oil, shut the engine off, recheck the oil, I install a new oil change sticker, I reset the oil life monitor, I remove the rack from the car and I park it in the parking lot. And for that I get 3/10 of an hour, which equates to about 18 minutes of my time. Okay, so I walk back up to the desk and I hand you the ticket and you hand it back to me and say, Rick, I need for you to go do a tire rotation on this car. And of course I'm probably grumbling under my breath knowing I'm duplicating a lot of what I just did. I go get the keys, I go to the parking lot, I pull the car in, I set the lift, I raise the car up on the lift, I remove the wheels and tires. Hopefully at this point, if I haven't checked the brakes before, I'm going to inspect them now. I put the wheels back on the car, I lower the car down, I torque the wheels, I set the rack out, I park the car in the parking lot, and you pay me 4/10 of an hour to do that, which is roughly 24 minutes. I get that. Okay, so I asked the manager, so how long does it really take to do a tire rotation while the car is up on the lift and we're doing an oil change on a car? And he said, maybe 10 minutes if they dilly-dally. And I said, my point exactly. So we have some overlap on these two labors here. Because we're paying the technician the 4/10 for the tire rotation and we're paying the technician 3/10 for an oil change for a collective 7/10 on that, it causes us to be uncompetitive on the price that we have to ask to be able to hold the effective labor rate. So how do you manage that? Well, let's look at the overlap between the oil change and tire rotation. And I'm not saying take it from 7/10 down to 4/10, maybe 5/10, but definitely no less than 6/10 of an hour that I'm going to pay for that service. So how much difference does 1/10 of an hour impact your effective labor rate? Let's think about that for a second. If I was paying 3/10 of an hour for an oil change and I'm paying 3/10 of an hour for a tire rotation, in this example, I'm paying a technician 6/10 of an hour to do an oil change and a tire rotation. Now, if my standard labor fee for that oil change tire rotation service was about $45, okay, and I take and I divide that $45 by the 0.6 hours that I paid the technician, my overall effective rate for that labor operation is going to be about $75. Okay, but if I took that 1/10 off between the 3/10 for the rotation and the 3/10 for the the oil change, and I paid the tech 0.5 hours, which is still a reasonable time on most brands, okay, at that same labor fee of $45, my effective labor rate just went from $75 to $90. If you take the $45 and divide it by the 0.5 hours, you will come up with $90. So in that particular example, 1/10 of an hour on one of the most frequent services that you do on a day in and day out basis in your shop can have a $15 impact on your effective labor rate. And I think even with his experience at that point, he realized that maybe it was time to go back and evaluate some of the flat rate times, particularly those ones that have overlap between the services that we're doing in a combination or packages or on our maintenance menu types of sales. So maybe this was some information that'll help you rethink your effective labor rate strategy. And yes, you can affect effective labor rate in your dealership. You just need to look at the frequency of labor operation codes that you do, look at the overlap between your combination services, and then make adjustments where necessary. So thanks for joining me on this episode of Ask NCM. If you have a question that you'd like to see us address on a future episode, please send your request to askncm@ncmassociates.com. Until next time, Rick Wegley, and thanks for joining me.